She woke up at 5:47 a.m. and she knew immediately that something was wrong. Not because she could see anything wrong. Not because she could hear anything wrong. But because of the silence. The silence was wrong. The silence had weight. The silence had presence. The silence had a name, and that name was consequences. Her name was Rachel Mitchell, and she was 29 years old, and she was about to discover that one night of poor judgment could change the entire trajectory of her life. But before we tell you what happened to Rachel, I need to tell you why you clicked on this video. I need to tell you what brought you here at this exact moment, because your curiosity, your fear, is the reason you're watching this right now. You clicked on this because you know what it feels like to wake up and realize that something has shifted. You clicked on this because you've had moments where you made a choice in the moment that you regretted the moment after. You clicked on this because you're terrified of making a mistake that can't be undone. You clicked on this because you've wondered, what if that one night, that one choice, that one moment had consequences that lasted forever? You clicked on this because you want to know, can you come back from this? Can you move forward after making a choice that feels unforgivable? Can you rebuild your life when you've made a mistake that feels catastrophic? This story is for you. This story is about what happens in the moments, days, and weeks after a choice is made that can't be unmade. This story is about what happens when silence becomes louder than any words. This story is about a woman who had to figure out how to live with the consequences of one night. Let's begin. Rachel had been married for 6 years. Her husband's name was Michael, and he was a good man in most ways. He was responsible. He was stable. He paid his bills on time. He didn't drink too much. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat. But somewhere along the way, the marriage had become something different. Not bad. Not abusive. Just empty. They had sex maybe once a month, and when they did, it felt like an obligation. They didn't talk about anything except logistics, whose turn it was to pick up groceries, whether they should refinance the mortgage, what to do about Michael's mother coming to visit. They didn't laugh together. They didn't dream together. They didn't touch except when they were having that obligatory sex. Rachel had mentioned to Michael that she was unhappy. She had suggested that they go to marriage counseling. Michael had said that marriage counseling was for people with real problems. He had said that they were fine. He had said that Rachel was being dramatic. So Rachel had stopped talking about it. Rachel had accepted that this was what marriage was. Companionship without intimacy, commitment without connection, a partnership that looked good from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. Rachel worked in marketing for a tech company. She was good at her job. She was smart and creative and collaborative. She was the kind of person that other people wanted to work with. And at work she felt alive. At work she felt valued. At work she felt like herself. One of her coworkers was a man named James. James was 32 years old. He was charming and funny and interested in what Rachel had to say. He asked her about her ideas. He laughed at her jokes. He listened to her. He saw her. And Rachel, who had spent 6 years being invisible to her husband, found herself drawn to being seen. It started innocently. Lunch conversations. Coffee meetings. Text messages about work projects. But it evolved into something else. Conversations about their lives. Conversations about their dreams. Conversations that felt like actual connection. Rachel knew that what was happening was dangerous. She knew that she was crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. But she also knew that she felt alive for the first time in years. One night, Michael had to work late. Michael was in a different city. Michael would be gone until midnight. And James texted Rachel asking if she wanted to grab dinner. Rachel knew what dinner meant. Rachel understood the implications. Rachel made a choice. She said yes. They went to a hotel bar instead of a restaurant. They had 2 drinks each. They talked and laughed and flirted in a way that Rachel hadn't flirted in years. And then, when the bar was closing, James asked if he could walk her to her car. On the way to her car, he kissed her. And Rachel kissed him back. And then he asked if they could go upstairs to a room. And Rachel said yes, it was fast and urgent and completely different from sex with Michael. It was intense and passionate and made her feel wanted. It made her feel alive. And then it was over. And James fell asleep. And Rachel lay in the darkness and felt the weight of what she had done. She had crossed a line. She had betrayed her husband. She had made a choice that couldn't be unmade. At 11 p.m., Rachel got dressed quietly and left the hotel. She drove home. She got into bed next to Michael when he got home at midnight, and she didn't tell him what she had done. Rachel woke up at 5:47 a.m. and she knew immediately that something was wrong. The silence was wrong because Michael usually snored. Michael's absence of sound meant that Michael was awake. Michael was lying next to her, not sleeping, just lying there. Rachel's heart started to race. Had he found out? Had he tracked her phone? Had someone told him? She didn't move. She didn't open her eyes. She lay completely still, trying to figure out what was happening. "I know," Michael said quietly into the darkness. Rachel's entire body went cold. "I know what you did," Michael said. Rachel opened her eyes. Michael was staring at the ceiling. He wasn't looking at her. He was just staring at the ceiling like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Michael, Rachel started. "Don't," Michael said. "Don't lie to me. Don't make excuses. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this didn't happen." Rachel's mind was racing. How did he know? When did he find out? What was he going to do? "James's wife called me," Michael said. She had a feeling he was cheating on her. She tracked his location. She saw the hotel. She called the hotel and they confirmed he checked in with a woman matching your description. Rachel felt like she was going to be sick. James was married. James had a wife. Rachel had been with a married man. Rachel wasn't just unfaithful. She was a homewrecker. "Oh my God," Rachel said. "Oh my God, Michael, I want you to leave," Michael said. "I want you to pack a bag and I want you to leave this house. Today. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear from you. I want you gone." Rachel sat up. "Michael, please. I made a mistake. I was confused. I was unhappy and I made a terrible choice, but nothing," Michael said. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were completely empty. "You didn't just cheat on me, Rachel. You had an affair with a married man. You're a homewrecker. You're someone that people warn their friends about. You're exactly the kind of woman that I never thought you were." Rachel wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain. She wanted to make him understand that she was more than this one mistake. But she also understood that there was nothing she could say that would matter. Nothing she could say would undo what she had done. "I'm calling a lawyer," Michael said. "I'm going to file for divorce. And we're going to figure out the division of assets. But you need to leave today." Rachel got out of bed. She packed a suitcase in silence. She left the house by 8 a.m. And she drove to a hotel and she sat in a room and she realized that her marriage was over. Her reputation at work was about to be destroyed. Her friendship with her coworkers was about to implode. Her life as she knew it was over, all because of one night, by the end of the week, everyone at work knew what had happened. Not the truth. The truth was complicated. But a version of the truth. Rachel had slept with James. James was married. Rachel had destroyed his marriage. No one knew that James's marriage was already falling apart. No one knew that James's wife had said she wanted a divorce 6 months before any of this happened. No one knew that James had been separated from his wife for 3 months. No one knew any of the context that might have made Rachel's choice slightly less catastrophic. What they knew was the simple version. Rachel was a homewrecker. Rachel was the kind of woman who would sleep with a married man. Rachel was someone to be avoided. She came into work the Monday after Michael threw her out, and the entire office went quiet. People who had been friendly suddenly looked away. People who had invited her to lunch stopped inviting her. People whispered when she walked past. Her manager called her into a meeting. He said that they were going to have to let her go. He said that her presence was creating a toxic work environment. He said that other employees had complained about feeling uncomfortable around her. Rachel wasn't fired for her performance. She was fired for her reputation. By midweek, Rachel was living in a hotel, unemployed, separated from her husband, and universally despised by everyone who knew her. She spent her days alone in her hotel room. She didn't know who to call. She didn't know who would answer. She assumed that everyone who had been her friend had now turned against her. She thought about calling her mother. But her mother had always been judgmental about sexuality. Her mother had always made it clear that a woman's value was tied to her sexual morality. Rachel knew that her mother would blame her. Her mother would say that Rachel had brought this on herself. She thought about calling her best friend, Sarah. But Sarah and Michael had been friends. Rachel didn't know if Sarah would take Michael's side. She thought about calling her therapist. But therapists were for people with real problems. And clearly Rachel's problem was that she was a bad person. So Rachel sat alone in her hotel room and she spiraled into depression. She barely ate. She barely slept. She spent hours on the internet reading articles about infidelity and shame and how to move forward after destroying your life. She found support forums for people who had cheated. She read stories from men and women who had made similar mistakes. And she realized that she wasn't unique. She wasn't the only person who had ever done something terrible. She wasn't the only person who had betrayed someone they loved. But knowing that didn't make her feel better. Knowing that didn't undo what she had done. On the 11th day after Michael threw her out, Rachel hit rock bottom. She was sitting on the hotel bed with an empty bottle of pills next to her, and she was thinking about whether she should take them. She wasn't actively trying to kill herself. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was just a quiet realization that maybe the world would be better off without her. Maybe everyone would be better off if she just disappeared. And then her phone rang. It was Sarah. Rachel didn't answer. Rachel let it go to voicemail. But Sarah called back. And called again. And called a third time. "I know you're not answering," Sarah's voicemail said. "But I'm coming to your hotel and I'm bringing ice cream and we're going to talk. And you're going to tell me what the hell is going on." Rachel wanted to tell Sarah not to come. Rachel wanted to tell Sarah that there was nothing to talk about, that Rachel was fine, that Rachel was just having a temporary setback. But Sarah didn't wait for permission. Sarah showed up at Rachel's hotel room 45 minutes later with Ben & Jerry's and a look of complete determination on her face. "Let me in," Sarah said through the door. Rachel considered not opening the door. Rachel considered pretending she wasn't there. But she opened the door. Sarah took one look at Rachel and she grabbed her and she held her. She didn't say anything. She just held her while Rachel cried. "I'm a terrible person," Rachel said into Sarah's shoulder. "I destroyed my marriage. I destroyed another marriage. I ruined my career. I'm a homewrecker and everyone hates me and I deserve to be alone forever." "You're not a terrible person," Sarah said. "You're a person who made a terrible choice. And those are two different things." "Everyone at work thinks I'm terrible," Rachel said. "Everyone at work is full of shit," Sarah said. "You want to know what Michael told me? Michael told me that he knew your marriage was dying. He told me that you had asked him to go to counseling and he refused. He told me that he wasn't surprised that you ended up with someone else because he had stopped making you feel loved." Rachel pulled back. "He said that." "Yes," Sarah said. "And he also said that he was partly responsible for what happened. He said that he should have listened to you when you told him you were unhappy. He said that he should have done the work to save the marriage. He said that he's angrier at himself than he is at you." Rachel didn't know what to say. She had expected Michael to paint her as a villain. She had expected Michael to tell everyone that she was a cheater and a liar. She had expected Michael to make sure that everyone hated her. But Michael had apparently done the opposite. Michael had apparently taken responsibility for his part in the destruction of their marriage. "As for James's wife," Sarah continued, "she actually reached out to me. She wanted me to tell you that she's not mad at you. She said that she and James had been having problems for years, and that his affair with you was just a symptom of a much bigger problem. She said that if anything, she's grateful to you because the affair forced them to finally deal with what was actually wrong." Rachel felt something shift inside her. She realized that maybe she wasn't as much of a villain as she thought she was. Maybe the situation was more complicated than she had believed. "What about my job?" Rachel asked. "Your job is full of hypocrites," Sarah said. "Your boss had an affair with his assistant 10 years ago. Everyone at work knew. No one cared. He's still employed. He's still respected. But suddenly when it's a woman, it becomes a scandal." Sarah was right. Rachel suddenly remembered the rumors about her boss. She remembered that everyone had known about his affair and had treated it as office gossip, not a moral failing. "So what am I supposed to do?" Rachel asked. "You're supposed to get a lawyer," Sarah said. "You're supposed to fight for a fair settlement in your divorce. You're supposed to look for a new job. You're supposed to understand that you made a mistake, and that you're going to spend some time learning from that mistake, and then you're going to move forward and build a life that is better than what you had before." Sarah stayed with Rachel that night. They talked until 3 a.m. Sarah told her about her own mistakes. Sarah told her about the time she had lied to her best friend about where she was. Sarah told her about the time she had stolen something from a store. Sarah told her about the time she had said something cruel to someone she loved. "We've all done terrible things," Sarah said. "That doesn't make us terrible people. That makes us human." The next morning, Rachel did something she had been too ashamed to do before. She called James. Her hands were shaking as she dialed his number. Part of her hoped he wouldn't answer. Part of her hoped that she could leave a voicemail and never have to hear his voice again. But he answered on the second ring. "I can't believe you're calling me," James said immediately. His voice was different than she remembered. It was tired. It was sad. It was the voice of someone who was also suffering the consequences. "I need to say something," Rachel said. She had rehearsed this 100 times in her head. She had written it down. She had practiced saying the words without crying. But now that she was actually speaking to him, all of that preparation fell away. "I need to apologize. Not for what happened between us, but for the impact it had on your wife. I was selfish and I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Rachel could hear James breathing. She could hear him processing what she had just said. "My wife already forgave you," James said finally. "She actually called me after she tracked me to the hotel. She said that if I was going to betray her, at least I was doing it with someone who was also in a bad marriage. She said that she wasn't surprised. She said that we had stopped being a marriage months ago and that this was just the final proof." Rachel felt something crack open inside her. She had been carrying so much guilt about James's wife. She had imagined that she had destroyed a happy marriage. She had imagined that James's wife hated her. But apparently, James's wife had been waiting for something like this to happen. James's wife had known that something was fundamentally broken. "I think she thanked you for it," James continued. Not in a nice way. More in a way where she realized that she could finally stop trying. She could finally admit that our marriage was dead and move on. "How is she?" Rachel asked. The question surprised her. She realized that she actually cared. She realized that she wanted James's wife to be okay. "She's actually great," James said. And there was genuine warmth in his voice when he said it. "She's already dating someone new. Someone who actually loves her. Someone who makes her laugh. Someone who shows up for her. And I'm genuinely happy for her. Which is weird because I'm the one who made her life harder." Rachel understood what James was saying. She understood that he was taking responsibility for his own choices. She understood that he was not making excuses or blaming anyone else. "And I'm getting help," James continued. "I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for 3 months now. And I'm trying to figure out why I needed to betray my wife. What was I looking for? Why wasn't what I had enough? Why did I risk everything for one night?" He paused. "And you know what my therapist told me? She told me that I was looking for permission to end the marriage. I was looking for a reason to justify leaving. And I found it in you." Rachel didn't know what to say. She had never considered that James might be doing the same work that she was doing. She had never considered that James might also be trying to understand his own choices. "I'm not blaming you," James said. "I'm just being honest. I made the choice. I could have said no when you said yes. I could have been honest with my wife about my unhappiness. I could have left the marriage in a way that was honest and transparent. But instead, I looked for a way to escape. And I hurt people in the process." Rachel realized, listening to James, that she had been assuming that her choices had destroyed everyone around her. But everyone around her was actually doing okay. Everyone around her was moving forward. Everyone around her was doing the work to understand themselves and to become better people. James's wife was dating someone who actually loved her. James was in therapy trying to understand his own patterns. Michael had apparently told Sarah that he took responsibility for his part in the destruction of their marriage. And Rachel was sitting in a hotel room feeling like she was the only person who had done anything wrong. "Thank you for calling," James said. "And I want you to know that I don't hate you. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you made a choice that had consequences, just like I did. And now we both get to figure out what we do with that knowledge." After Rachel hung up the phone, she sat in silence for a long time. She realized that she had been carrying so much shame about what she had done. But she also realized that shame doesn't actually help anything. Shame just makes you feel bad about yourself. Shame doesn't change what happened. Shame doesn't undo anything. What actually helps is understanding. What actually helps is accountability. What actually helps is doing the work to become a different person than the one who made that choice. Rachel hired a divorce lawyer. The lawyer's name was Sandra, and she was a woman in her 50s who had seen a lot of divorces. Some of them were acrimonious. Some of them were civil. Sandra's job was to make sure that Rachel got a fair settlement. But what Sandra also did was listen. Sandra sat across from Rachel in her office and she listened while Rachel told her story. And when Rachel finished, Sandra said something that surprised her. "You're not the first woman who has cheated during a failing marriage," Sandra said. "You're not the first woman who has felt shame about it. And you're not the first woman who has thought that this one choice defines her entire character. But I want you to know something. The women who come out of this okay are the ones who do the work. The ones who go to therapy. The ones who figure out what they're really looking for. The ones who don't just blame everyone else and move on." Sandra helped Rachel fight for a fair settlement. In the end, she and Michael agreed to split their assets relatively evenly. Michael got the house because Rachel didn't want to stay in it anyway. Rachel got cash and investments that would allow her to live independently while she figured out her next steps. It wasn't an acrimonious divorce. It was just a sad one. They met with lawyers instead of judges. They made agreements instead of fighting in court. They treated each other with respect even though their marriage was ending. On the day that the divorce was finalized, Rachel met Michael at a coffee shop. They sat across from each other and they didn't say much. But Michael said something that mattered. "I'm sorry that I didn't listen to you," Michael said. "I'm sorry that I told you that marriage counseling was for people with real problems. I'm sorry that I made you feel invisible. You deserved better." Rachel cried. She cried because she was grateful for Michael taking responsibility. She cried because they were ending their marriage. She cried because she understood that they both could have made different choices and they hadn't. "I'm sorry too," Rachel said. "I'm sorry that I gave up instead of fighting. I'm sorry that I looked for someone else instead of fighting for us. I'm sorry that I hurt you." They didn't hug. They didn't promise to stay friends. But they left that coffee shop understanding that they had both done their best with what they had, and sometimes their best wasn't enough to save the relationship. Rachel moved into a small apartment. It was a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that wasn't fancy but was safe and affordable. She looked for jobs, sending out applications to different companies. But she also did something else that was more important. She started therapy. She found a therapist through a referral from Sandra. The therapist's name was Dr. Patricia, and she was a woman in her 60s who had been practicing therapy for 30 years. She had seen a lot of human brokenness. She had seen a lot of people at their worst moments. "I want to understand why I did it," Rachel told Dr. Patricia in her first session. They were sitting in a comfortable office with soft lighting and plants. There was a box of tissues on the table between them. "I want to understand what was wrong with me that made me capable of this. I want to understand how I became the kind of person who would sleep with a married man." "Nothing was wrong with you," Dr. Patricia said immediately. "You weren't broken. You weren't defective. You were unhappy. You were lonely. You were seeking connection. And you made a choice that seemed good in the moment but had consequences that extended further than you anticipated. That's not a character flaw. That's being human." Dr. Patricia explained to Rachel that humans are not good or bad. Humans are complex. Humans make choices based on a combination of their emotional state, their circumstances, their history, and their needs. Rachel wasn't a bad person who had done a good thing. She was a good person who had done a bad thing. "The question is not how to punish yourself for making a bad choice," Dr. Patricia said. "The question is how to learn from the choice and become a different person because of it." Over the course of months, Rachel worked with Dr. Patricia to understand her own choices. They explored Rachel's marriage. They explored Rachel's childhood. They explored Rachel's patterns in relationships. And gradually, Rachel began to understand herself better. Rachel understood that she had been using James as a replacement for the intimacy that was missing from her marriage. She understood that the affair wasn't really about James. It was about what James represented. Attention, validation, being seen. Rachel understood that she had ignored the reality that James was married because admitting the reality would have meant confronting her own selfishness. If she acknowledged that James was married, she would have to acknowledge that she was knowingly hurting someone. And Rachel didn't want to be the kind of person who hurt people. So she had compartmentalized. She had pretended that James's wife didn't exist. She had pretended that the affair had no impact beyond the two of them. Rachel understood that she had blamed everyone else for her unhappiness. Michael for being emotionally unavailable, her marriage for being dead, her job for being unfulfilling, when actually she had choices. She could have pushed harder for marriage counseling. She could have left the marriage. She could have had an honest conversation with Michael about what was missing. She could have chosen not to pursue James even though he was pursuing her. But instead, she had made a choice that hurt everyone. And Rachel had to live with that. Not by wallowing in shame. Not by feeling like a bad person forever. But by understanding what she had done and making sure that she never made a similar choice again. She also had to learn to forgive herself. This was harder than anything else. This took longer than anything else. This was the real work. It took months of therapy. It took months of sitting with her shame instead of running from it. It took months of believing that she was a good person who had made a bad choice, even when that belief didn't feel true. It took months of understanding that one night didn't define her entire life. One choice didn't make her a bad person forever. One mistake didn't mean she couldn't learn and grow and become better. Dr. Patricia helped her understand that self-forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that what you did was okay. Self-forgiveness means accepting that you did something wrong, understanding why you did it, committing to not doing it again, and then letting go of the shame. 6 months into therapy, Rachel had a breakthrough. She was sitting in Dr. Patricia's office and she said something that surprised both of them. "I think I needed to learn that I'm not responsible for Michael's happiness. I think I needed to learn that I can't fix someone else's unhappiness. I think I needed to learn that I have to take care of myself first." Dr. Patricia smiled. "What would that look like?" she asked. "What would taking care of yourself first look like?" "It would look like being honest," Rachel said. "It would look like saying to Michael, 'I'm unhappy and I need us to do something about this.' It would look like listening to myself when I'm unhappy instead of ignoring my unhappiness. It would look like not sleeping with a married man." Dr. Patricia laughed. It was a kind laugh, not a judgmental laugh. "Yes," Dr. Patricia said. "It would look like that." 1 year after the affair, Rachel had a job. It was a remote position at a marketing company that specialized in nonprofits. The pay was good. The work was meaningful. And she wasn't working with people who knew about her affair, which meant she could start fresh. She was also dating again. She had started slowly, going on a few dates with people she met through apps. Most of them didn't go anywhere. But slowly she was learning how to be vulnerable with people again. She was learning how to trust. She was learning how to be in relationships in a way that was healthy and honest. She reconciled with her mother. She called her mother and she told her the whole story. She expected judgment. She expected her mother to say, "I told you so," or to be disappointed in her. But instead, her mother surprised her. "I wasn't a good wife to your father," her mother said. "I was controlling and judgmental. And after he died, I realized that I had spent so much time criticizing him that I had never really loved him. And I've spent the last 30 years regretting that. So when you tell me that you made a mistake in your marriage, I understand. I understand that marriage is hard. I understand that people make choices that hurt the people they love." Rachel cried. She cried because she had been expecting rejection and instead received compassion. She cried because her mother was telling her own story of regret. She cried because she realized that everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has done something they regret. Everyone carries shame. But not everyone does the work to move past that shame. Rachel also reconnected with Sarah. Sarah had stood by her through the worst of it. Sarah had shown up when Rachel felt like no one else would. Sarah had been the bridge between Rachel's old life and her new life. They had lunch every other week. They talked about Rachel's therapy. They talked about Rachel's dating life. They talked about Sarah's own life. And Rachel realized that this friendship was worth more than any romantic relationship because it was based on honesty and support instead of passion and need. 2 years after the affair, Rachel was living a completely different life. She was 31 years old. She was working as a freelance marketing consultant for nonprofits. She was making more money than she had been making at her corporate job, and she was doing it on her own terms. She was able to work from anywhere, which gave her flexibility and autonomy. She was also dating someone new. His name was David, and he was nothing like Michael or James. Michael had been emotionally unavailable. James had been an escape. But David was present. David was kind. David was emotionally available. David was genuinely interested in building a relationship that was based on honesty and communication. She didn't rush into a relationship with David. She waited a year. She made sure that she was healed enough to be in a healthy relationship. She made sure that she wasn't using David to fill a void. She made sure that she was choosing him for the right reasons. When she finally said yes to David, it felt like a choice. Not a desperate need. Not an escape. But a conscious decision to build a life with someone who was willing to do the work to make the relationship work. Rachel also became an advocate for people who had made mistakes. She started a support group for people who were struggling with shame and regret. She started a blog where she wrote about her experience. She started speaking publicly about the importance of accountability and self-forgiveness. She realized that by sharing her story, she was giving other people permission to share their stories. She was showing people that one mistake doesn't define you forever. She was showing people that it's possible to come back from the worst choice you've ever made. 3 years after the affair, Rachel ran into Michael at a restaurant. She didn't recognize him at first. But when she did, she walked over to his table. Michael was with a woman. Michael was holding her hand. Michael was smiling in a way that Rachel had never seen him smile before. "Rachel," Michael said, surprised. He stood up and he hugged her. It was an awkward hug, but it was genuine. "Hi, Michael," Rachel said. "I'm happy to see you." "This is Lisa," Michael said, introducing the woman. "Lisa, this is Rachel. My ex-wife." Lisa extended her hand and she smiled warmly. "It's so nice to meet you," Lisa said. "Michael has told me all about you." Rachel was grateful for Lisa's kindness. She was grateful that Michael had moved on. She was grateful that he had found someone. "I'm engaged," Michael said, showing Rachel a ring. "We're getting married next fall." "That's wonderful," Rachel said, and she meant it. "I'm really happy for you." After they said goodbye, Rachel walked back to her table where David was waiting. She sat down and she looked at David and she felt grateful. Grateful for David. Grateful for her life. Grateful for the choices she had made to rebuild it. Michael told her later, when they ran into each other one more time and actually had a real conversation, that he had learned so much from their marriage ending. He told her that he had learned that he needed to be emotionally available in a relationship. He told her that he had learned that you have to do the work to maintain a marriage. He told her that Lisa had made him want to be a better partner because she had shown him what it felt like to be with someone who genuinely loved him. "I'm grateful for what happened," Michael said. "Not because it didn't hurt. It hurt a lot. But because it forced me to change. And I'm a better person because of it." Rachel understood what he meant. She understood that she was also grateful for what had happened. She understood that the affair had been the worst choice she had ever made. But it had also been the catalyst for the best life she had ever built. So here's what I want to ask you in the comments section. And I want you to really think about this because your answer matters. Have you ever woken up and realized that you made a choice you can't undo? Have you ever done something that you immediately regretted? Have you ever felt the weight of consequences that extended further than you anticipated? Have you ever been ashamed of who you are? Have you ever felt like one mistake defined your entire character? Have you ever wondered if you could come back from something you've done? Have you ever judged someone for their mistakes? Have you ever assumed that a person is bad based on one action? Have you ever realized that you were wrong about someone? Rate this story from 0 to 10. Tell me if it resonated with you. Tell me if you've made mistakes that felt catastrophic. Tell me if you believe that people can come back from their worst choices. But most importantly, tell me this. What choice are you living with right now? What decision from your past is still haunting you? What regret do you carry? Because I want you to understand something fundamental. You are not your worst choice. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by what you do after you make those mistakes. You are defined by whether you learn. You are defined by whether you grow. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Because there are so many stories like this one. Stories about people who have made terrible choices and who have rebuilt their lives. Stories about shame and redemption. Stories about how the worst night of your life can become the catalyst for the best life you ever build. And if you're in Rachel's situation right now, if you've made a choice that feels unforgivable, if you feel like you're a bad person, if you feel like there's no coming back from what you've done, I want you to know there is a way forward. It's not easy. It requires accountability. It requires therapy. It requires time. But it is possible. You can forgive yourself. You can rebuild your life. You can become someone you're proud of. The story doesn't end with the worst choice you've made. The story ends with who you become because of that choice. I'll see you next time.